Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by Twitter. You know when you go to Twitter on your computer, how does that work exactly? If you know, call us. Episode 252, Ionic's React Native Portals with Josh Thomas.
Well, Mazen, no Robin today, so you know what that means, of course.
Yes. Sports.
We get to talk. This is a sports podcast now.
Exactly.
Sports radio, not React Native radio. Before we alienate, most of our audience, I don't care. That's fine. We'll talk sports. It's okay.
Yeah.
Some of them care.
Robin
I
keeps
know
us
that.
on track, so here we are.
She does. Yeah, well, that's what she gets for not showing up. That's my opinion. So my Seattle Mariners, Major League Baseball, finally made the playoffs after 21 years. I don't know what will have happened between now and when this episode comes out, but they did just win the wild card series, which is unbelievable. So let me put it in perspective for people who maybe don't follow sports very much. The last time that the Mariners went to the playoffs, I think either 18 or 19 years old, and I'm 40 now. So that's a while ago. That's half my life ago. And I don't know. It's pretty exciting. Actually, my son Cedric and I went to a game, not a playoff game, but one of the games right before the playoffs. And it was a lot of fun. It's been a while since I've been to a game.
I heard the wildcard game was epic too.
Yeah. Oh man, one of the best games I've ever seen in my life. They were down like 8-1 at one point.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And we were just my brother was over and Cedric and I were watching and we were just so despondent, and then they just started chipping away and then ended up winning the game.
Like 13 innings or something. Yeah.
In this case, they didn't go to extra innings. They managed to win it in 9. But yeah.
Oh, I must be thinking of another game then.
There was another one that was 15 innings. So it's been a really fun postseason already. It's been a lot of fun to watch. I don't normally follow baseball, but now that the Mariners are actually good, I'm back into it a little bit, and it's been a lot of fun.
I must confess, I was never a baseball fan until I met my wife, who's from New York, and she's a big diehard Yankees fan. So I guess I'm a Yankees fan. Sorry, let me repeat that. I am a Yankees fan. I have to say that with some authority.
I guess I'm an Yankees.
But yeah, I mean, I watched the last, 6-7 games just to see Judge hit 61 and then 62, was it? So that was a lot of fun.
So what side of the fence are you on? This is kind of inside baseball in a very real sense, but what side of the fence are you on? Is Aaron Judge the first person to really surpass Roger Maris's 61? Or are you going to count the, and I see our guest shaking his head, but I know he's a Cardinals fan, so I'm not going to pay attention to him. Do you think he's the first without an asterisk, or are you going to count the other ones who have?
So I don't have a lot of context. I know what happened in all the other ones.
Yeah, just sort of like the PED era, the steroid era. There's sort of they were cheating, blah, blah, blah.
Were they taking these steroids when they hit those? They did. So
probably. Yeah.
I would say the Judges then. Judge and then Maris.
Okay, I got to bring in our guest. So obviously I'm Jamin. He's Mazen. And I will introduce us more formally in a second, but Josh Thomas is here, Cardinals fan. Obviously, you were probably a big McGuire fan, Mark McGuire fan.
Yeah. It was a pretty big deal when I was a kid. It's what brought baseball back from after the strike. So it's
true. Yeah. So obviously McGuire then hit 73, something like that. 72,
I believe.
72. Yeah, and then
isn't 74 Bonds?
Barry Bonds, yeah. I think he hit 74.
Speaking of PEDs, yes.
Yeah.
The pitchers were all on steroids as well. There's all this whole argument, but we are, believe it or not a sports radio program. We could talk about this all day. I will get back to our main topic here. I'm Jamin Holmgren. What, Mazen?
I was going to say, isn't GitHub Copilot our PED?
It's fair.
Anyways, back to your intro, Jim.
I did a joke tweet. I don't think very many people got it. I did a joke tweet that we have done some analysis on your code and found that you've been using AI assistants to write your code. So you are now banned from software engineering.
Yeah.
No, people didn't really get it. I don't know. There's this whole like chess cheating scandal going on. There's a poker cheating scandal. There's even a competitive fishing cheating scandal going on right now.
I heard of that. Yeah.
So like it was relevant, but it didn't get much attention. I thought it was funny. Anyway, I'm Jamin Holmgren, your host and friendly CTO of Infinite Red. I'm going to skip all of my stuff. You can listen to other episodes for my full bio. I am joined today by my incredible co-host, Mazen.
Ooh.
Mazen Chami lives in Durham, North Carolina. Former pro soccer player and coach. Works at Infinite Red as well. And our guest is Josh Thomas, who lives in Madison, Wisconsin, despite, I guess, being a Cardinals fan. So you must be from St. Louis.
Yeah. Grew up in the St. Louis area, but in Madison, Wisconsin now.
That's an interesting move.
Yeah.
To go that direction, to the cold.
It was a conscious move. It was wanting to move to a smaller city that was kind of a college town. So it was going to be Madison or Ann Arbor, and Madison's just a little bigger.
Okay. Just fit the profile.
Mm-hmm.
Josh is a product manager at Ionic, works on portals, which we will be talking about. He also worked on Stencil.js. 5 years before that, before becoming a product manager, he was an open source developer, worked on the core team on Ionic. He has 2 daughters. He's into music. And so really happy to have you on, Josh. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
This episode is sponsored by Chain React 2023. Chain React is returning in person this year. You should, man, say that 5 times fast. You should sign up for the Chain React newsletter so that you will be informed when the conference and workshop tickets are available. chainreactconf.com. That's exciting to have a different sponsor. And then also sponsored by Infinite Red. We are a premier React Native design and development agency located fully remote in the US and Canada. Hit us up, infinite.red/React Native. And don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast, because we love hearing that. All right, let's get into our topic. We brought Josh on. I've actually met with Josh a couple times about this, just sort of like, off air. But Josh's been working on a thing called React Native Portals, and we're not. So first off, clear up the confusion here. You're not talking about like React portals in React Native, right?
No, it's completely different. I didn't come up with the name, but when you think about it, the name kind of makes sense. It's about empowering web views to appear within React Native. So it's kind of like a portal view into it. Most of the jokes we have at the company are about eating cake, though, about the portals game.
Okay, yeah. I love that game. It's fun.
How does Portal work then?
So Portals, the underlying technology is something called capacitor, which some people know about it, some people don't. It's really about this like enhanced web view that you place within your existing React Native applications. So the focus is really on existing applications rather than new development.
Yeah, so more of a brownfield approach. And so because of that, this seems to be more applicable to like bigger enterprise. Like you have a lot of code. You can't just go and like rewrite the whole thing.
Absolutely. And we think about it more as empowering more teams to be able to contribute to an existing application. So you could have many portals within your application. You could have, scale up the number of web teams that you have contributing to your React Native application. But React Native is just one of the targets. There's also portals for native as well for iOS and Android.
That makes sense. Now, Capacitor, you're saying, is like an enhanced web view. Differentiate this for us from React Native Web View, which I've been involved in open source. I know because of that experience how complex web views really are. Like most people don't realize. It's almost like an entire framework within a framework. React Native Web View is probably arguably the biggest React Native third-party library that has any, like adoption. It's enormous, and there's a reason for that. It's got a huge API surface, so many props, so many different ways you can configure it, and it continues to grow because there's just so many different ways that you can use WebView. But talk about Capacitor a little bit more and differentiate it from React Native WebView.
Sure. React Native WebView is really about empowering developers to show web-based content, right? Things that are served from an HTTP server. So you've got an existing web property that you're trying to show in your React Native application. The way Capacitor works and portals as well is it's showing web content, but that content actually lives on device. So it's meant to be more around creating an experience that feels like it fits in the larger application rather than like taking someone and showing them content from a website. So the files live on device, and there can be communication back and forth from the web code, the JavaScript code, the HTML, and the host application, which is native or React Native at this point.
So looking at your package, it seems like this is a new application that's out there. So I think it was released a couple months ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we actually released it in September, but it really started getting popular, I'd say around January.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So about a year at this point. Would it be October?
Yeah. For portals.
Correct.
Capacitor, though, the tech that it's based on has been around for around 5 years, I think.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So, okay, it's been around for a while. What would it look like? What would a journey look like for me or any team out there that's looking to move a web app to a React Native application, successfully? And what would that look like?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult answer, right? Because it's really not about taking a web application that's hosted somewhere and putting it into a React Native application. It's really taking a perspective on your existing React Native application and looking at features that you're trying to add to it, right? And a very common scenario in large companies is those features are developed by individual teams, right? So in a web perspective, it's easy to have these things separated because URL is good enough to separate. You like put a reverse proxy in place, right? But in native applications or in React Native applications, that separation isn't as easy across teams. Like we don't have the idea of microfrontends and React Native, unless I'm wrong.
No, you're right. And this sort of like from our conversation, it seems like it's a solution for that problem specifically, where it's like, hey, we have a team, we don't want them to have to integrate as tightly with the rest of the team. We want them to operate a little more autonomously and build out their feature. Maybe they're in charge of one particular feature. Just as an aside, I heard, for example, that there was like a whole team devoted to just the buy button on Amazon or something like that. Like they're these big ones, with very critical interactions, they'll have whole teams just for one component, more or less.
They've got an entire team just dedicated to showing you a list of products that might be things that you would want to buy, right?
Yeah,
after you've made
a
purchase.
So this is what we're talking about.
Yes.
These types of things. Yeah. So in those cases, you don't want this. Well, actually, tell me what happens when you don't do this, like when you don't do sort of the micro front end. What are the problems that pop up?
I think a lot of the problems that you see are things that you see with typical monolith applications, like large code bases, is that you're trying to have a code base. And when you look at it from something of like more native versus React Native, there's a limited number of React Native or native developers at an organization, right, that have that expertise. So in order to add additional features, you have to either put it in the queue of the timeline of like the priority of features that are going to be released, or you hire more developers, right, in order to accomplish that. But it doesn't always work out because usually the features that are being provided are the web developers that are working on it are experts, right? They're experts in that specific problem space. So there really isn't an easy way to do it. Maybe they're using React Native WebView to accomplish it.
Right. Oh, I know that's definitely happening. It's not a great tool for that necessarily because it is such a general purpose Swiss Army knife.
I think there's a quote I want to pull from your website. I believe I found this. Ionic Portals allows you to quickly and safely embed those experiences in an iOS and Android application without massively impacting native developers' workflows, while also allowing web developers to test their code without needing a mobile device. I think that's huge because, I'm working on a project right now where I can't get the iOS and Android up and running, and that's usually the toughest thing around environment specific. Because, quick context, I was working on a React.js app, micro frontend specifically, and then now moving to React Native to help support this one issue. My environments are completely different in this scenario because it's two separate projects. So I'm really struggling converting everything over, and I know I'm going to have to like reverse engineer that back so I can get back to the web web stuff later. So I think this is key, and it helps a lot. So can you talk about some of these developer experiences that you guys have heard from others about some good stuff? Probably maybe some other side of things where some things might need to improve on that too.
Yeah, I think what we've seen really is the tooling that we've created is specifically for native developers, right? Or React Native developers. Because if you tell a web developer that they're able to contribute to an existing mobile application, they're excited about it, right? They don't need to jump through they're okay jumping through a few hoops in order to get it to work. But really convincing the teams that exist with React Native or Native in general, you've got to create tooling that speaks to them and creates a great developer experience for them in order to empower more teams to do so. So we've gone through a lot of work on this and creating an experience that feels like it belongs in the existing problem space, right? We're not going to, if you're a native developer, we're not going to have you do an npm install, right? It doesn't make sense. I think one of the benefits though for our web developers is that the experience of development feels like, we expect you to do it in Chrome or Safari, or your development should not be different than the experience that you have today for web development. It's just that it's used in a native application rather than being hosted on a website somewhere.
That's great.
And I think that that's one of the things that people are really interested by, is that they can focus on doing the development they've always done, but just have another place where that content can be used, a new platform.
So I think the biggest question that comes to my mind when I hear this is it going to feel native? That's the big thing. Like, is it going to feel like janky? Is it going to feel like, right? Like I built a couple apps in PhoneGap way back in the day, and it was sort of like there was a lot of jank and it was hard to get it to feel like a native app. But with Portals, like, is the performance good? And then how'd you do that?
Yeah, there's a few things, right? So comparing it to back in the day, things have changed dramatically since then for browsers and for devices, right?
Yeah.
I've got a new iPhone 14 Pro, and comparing that to what I had with a 3GS, like,
right.
They're not the same, right? It's a different ballpark now.
Yeah.
But also browsers have really changed dramatically over time as well. And specifically for iOS, right? Years ago, we were using a different web view than what we have today. So we're using WK Web View, and that's on par with what Safari provides.
Instead of UI Web View. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to start with, there's a lot of things that have changed in the web space on mobile devices. But also, I think that the biggest problem people have with using web views in a native application is the latency of the experience. Like, the amount of time it takes in order to display that content. And that's why we are so gung-ho about only allowing content to be displayed from files that live on device.
Which is a lot like React Native. If React Native had to go out and download the JavaScript every time it needed to do something, it would be slow too. But because the JavaScript is living on the device, and that's what you're doing with Portals as well. You're keeping the web content right on the device. That makes sense. You're just kind of getting rid of the whole HTTP request, cycle, and also potentially loading errors and things like that.
And the waterfall from the initial request taking place in order to all the subsequent files loading.
Yeah.
And we know that on mobile devices, you really don't know what the network's going to look like at any point in time.
Does Portal have support for Expo or even now like the latest new architecture specifically?
It's a great question. We don't have support for Expo right now. And we actually evaluated this early on, but all of the customers that we've talked to who are using React Native have already ejected. So it wasn't really a priority for us to ensure that it worked, considering all of our customers are already in a scenario for not doing it.
And Expo now has support for custom native code through their config plugins and things like that. So honestly, even Expo isn't really concerned about things supporting specifically Expo Go and the sort of like the fully managed workflow. That's actually a very small part of Expo these days.
Yeah, and for the new architecture, I think it's definitely something we're evaluating, and we're excited to see where it goes. But really, we take a look at what our customers have, what their needs are, and what our the prospects we talk to what their needs will be. So we're probably going to be a little bit behind on introducing things for the new architecture until it's needed.
Gotcha.
I don't even think you're behind, to be honest. I think new architecture, to be completely honest, is at least 9 months out in terms of adoption, widespread adoption, potentially longer. It's, we're going to have to see, but even though, Facebook is using it internally already in their apps, the community has a long ways to go to catch up, and there's a reason for that. It's not just the community being lazy. There's actually still a lot of stuff that has to be ironed out before it will be. Otherwise, the transition would just be very brutal. So right now, if everybody tried to swap over, I think they would have a really tough time. I don't think you're necessarily even behind. I think you're just evaluating like everybody else.
It's good to hear.
So you mentioned some customers that have given you guys some feedback on Portal. What are your website, as far as the examples go, only highlights e-commerce, and I can see how that would be a good fit for this.
Yeah.
What are some other cases, or is it only e-commerce? That's your main target? Yeah. What are some cases for using this?
Yeah. So what you read about e-commerce was originally when we wanted to show this off, we created an example application. Mm-hmm. And e-commerce was an easy one for people to understand, especially for a checkout process that they want to share across platforms. I think that what we've got customers across many different spaces, financial spaces, a few different customers there, a large airline. And I think that some of the feedback that we've received is if they're replacing an existing web view, the performance improvement is dramatic. Because they're not dealing with existing latency. But I think what we're hearing from the financial vertical in particular is empowering those web teams to be able to contribute to that existing native application is something that they are really, really excited about. Mm-hmm. I actually come from a financial company. First 8 years of my career was working at Edward Jones, which is a large financial company. And they have a lot of teams with expertise in different areas. And those teams, their primary language is web.
Yeah.
That's just how it works for internal applications. So being able to take that and bring it to mobile and not just have it on desktop is something that a lot of companies are looking forward to.
Yeah. And you named a couple industries where security is key. Financial, forget about it. If finances weren't secure, there'd be mayhem everywhere. So that's pretty cool that, with security, you can use this and then use, React Native in general also.
Yeah. All of our products go through assessment. We have a security team that we work with in order to evaluate those and ensure that there aren't any, I don't want to speak too much to it, but any real problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like, there's on your website, there's a thing that kind of goes through who Portals is for and who Portals is not for. So I'm just going to read off some of these. Portals is for you if you'd like to accelerate app development, make more effective use of your time. You're maintaining a complicated, brittle web view on your own. I know there's people in the audience who are kind of probably nodding right now. Your apps require a seamless user experience embedding web content into native. You want to incorporate web-based experiences with the skills your web team already has. You'd like to enable both web and native teams to collaborate in a safe and effective manner. And then it's not for you if you're already content with using the stock web views from the platform vendors. You'd prefer to roll your own security features, integrations. You're happy with the traditional web view user experience in native apps. You're not currently using or planning to leverage any web-based experiences in your apps, or you plan to keep your web and native teams focused on their respective platforms. I think that's a pretty good list of kind of how you would evaluate whether Portals is for you or not. So one thing about this, and normally when we have people on, it's like this is open source and free for everyone. But in this case, because Portals is focused on more of an enterprise level, and you're really putting a lot of effort into kind of making that a great experience. This is not a free license, right? This is not MIT. No,
it is not MIT, but we have a unique license with this. So you're able to use Portals in non-production environments. This is source available. So if you want to look at the source code, you can do so. And if you're working at a company that has less than $1 million in revenue, you're actually able to use it in production.
Oh, okay.
For free.
Well, that's a pretty permissive thing. So essentially you could kind of start off with, okay, this is helpful for me in my startup, use it for free. And then once you get to that million level, then
talk to us.
Then talk to you.
Yep, definitely.
I like that model. That's interesting. Yeah.
Very cool.
I mean, we came up with that license because, we're traditionally an open source company. A lot of the tools we provide are open source, and we were trying to come up with a license that we felt worked well for our existing customers or our existing community, as well as what we want to provide in the future for larger organizations.
Totally makes sense to me. And honestly, and you know this, Josh, you've done open source for a long time. Getting sustainability within open source is very difficult. And I will tell you right now that the WebView team is not real fond of maintaining WebView. Like, we're just not. It's not very fun. There's no glory in it. Nobody notices. If it's broken, they notice. That's it. Sort of like being an offensive lineman in the NFL. Nobody notices you unless you do your job badly.
Very true. Very true.
So that's essentially what it is. And a lot of open source is that way. Like, it just is. You're not the wide receiver. You're not the quarterback. You're just in the trenches.
It's really fun to create a new project. New open source is always fun.
Yeah.
But supporting something in open source over a very long time is very draining and difficult.
And that's why I think coming up with licensing and whatnot is, with some permissiveness, like you can still use it on your smaller apps and things like that. But I think that's actually, I think we need to be exploring these routes to make it sustainable long term. Otherwise, we just won't have as cool tools.
Completely agree.
I mean, if I'm a small startup and I'm trying to break into some of these industries, I get this essentially for free until I hit my milestones. And then when I hit my milestones, obviously as any company grows and hits that $1 million mark, it comes with a lot more responsibilities. So being able to afford it at that point should be absolutely fine because it's gotten you that far. And potentially if you're in the e-commerce field, it's brought you all that money essentially at no cost.
Yeah. And honestly, when companies get to that size, it's a liability not to have someone to help you.
Absolutely.
Right.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
They're looking for that support.
There have been situations where we've had open source libraries. I know one time we were working on a project that used UI Kitten, and we reached out to the company behind UI Kitten to help us with an issue. And having, being able to pay them to help us was helpful. It was really helpful. When you don't have that support, when it's just like WebView, I hate to say this, but there was a guy that reached out and said, I'd like to pay you, the core team, to fix an issue for me. And nobody on the core team was interested, even though they were offering money. That's where we were. There's no real support there. I hate to say it because WebView is a very important part of the ecosystem, but it's so complicated. It's such a complex beast. It's painful to work on. So I think it's good that there are some alternatives out there. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Josh. It was a quick little overview. We'll definitely, people can go check out ionic.io/portals. Go check out Portals. Like Josh said, you can try it out on your smaller projects and see how it works for you. Maybe it'll work better if you're especially if you're maintaining something that's using React Native WebView and you're not super satisfied with how it's working. Don't contact us. Go check out Portals instead and see if that works for you better. If you'd like to nerd out more about React Native, you can check out my Twitch stream at rn.live. By the way, I haven't been streaming much lately. We've been getting ready for a conference in London, so I may not be streaming for the next few weeks, but I'll get back to it. Usually during the fall and winter, I stream more often. Maybe I'll have Josh on and we'll do some hacking, some open source hacking or something. You can also join our Slack community at community.infinite.red and our new Twitter community, rntwitter.infinite.red. Where can people find you, Josh, online?
You can find me on Twitter at jtoms1.
jtoms, THOMS1.
Correct.
Mazen is at Mazen Chami, and you can find me at Jamin Holmgren. Make sure to follow all of us, and then also go and follow React Native Radio at React Native RDIO. As always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, Jed Bartosky, our designer, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Thanks to our sponsors, Chain React 2023 and Infinite Red. Check us out at chainreactconf.com and infinite.red/React Native. Thanks to all of you. Make sure to subscribe, maybe give us a rating on your favorite podcasting platform. By the way, Robin's not here, but Mazen, do you have a dad joke instead of the usual mom joke?
I do.
Okay. I'm preparing myself.
I was on a diabetes awareness site. It asked me if I accept all cookies. Is that a trick question? That's the joke.
That's the joke. There's just no way to like end the episode elegantly after a bad joke like that. I just don't know how to do it.
Thanks. I'll be here all week, by the way.
Yeah, sure. We'll see you all.